All right. I actually don't think that we've ever met in person. If we have met at a conference, maybe in passing, but I don't I don't recall. So, um, so you are Josh Calkin. You teach at Wayne State College. I
Yep.
think you do athletic bands, tuba euphonium, stuff like that.
Yeah, so all applied low brass and assistant band director. So I do one of our two concert bands. I direct the pep band. I help with the marching band. I do the jazz band, and numerous other things.
Okay, cool deal. And that's in northern Nebraska.
Yep, Northeast Nebraska.
Okay, all
So
right,
yeah, Wayne State College, definitely not Wayne State University in Detroit.
very
We get their mail sometimes, but we're not them.
nice. Okay, so I think the only thing that it really says on the piece is that you approached Barbara in 2019, and obviously it was finished in 2020. Um, and it looks like there was a consortium of folks that helped fund it from what the piece says. So if you could just tell me kind of how the piece came about, and we can go from there.
Sure. Well, I mean, I'll start by saying that I knew Barbara for years and years and years, because her sort of introduction to the tuba world, so to speak, came through Mike Fisher, who was my teacher at Boise State. So the very first piece that she wrote for him, Arioso Gloria, um, I had heard it very shortly after she had written it because Dr. Fisher performed it out at my school. And I programmed it on one of my master's recitals. And then we also did the premiere of her concerto that she wrote for him with the Boise State Symphony Orchestra. So, like, from the very beginning, I really loved Barbara's music. And I knew, like, and I've played, I don't know, 8 pieces of hers maybe over the years. Um, and I knew when it came time for me to do a recording project of some kind that I wanted to feature a piece of hers. And it seemed like now was the most appropriate time. I'm looking forward to hopefully getting this recording project done this summer. We're having a baby in like probably 8 days or so, so we'll see how all that pans out now. But um, so anyway, we were at iTech in Iowa City in 2019, and we were at the lifetime members banquet, and I was sitting at a table with Barbara. I was sitting right next to her actually, and that's when I kind of started to have the conversation with her about I'd really like a new piece for this recording project, and the concept that I had. And again, this is kind of the long story behind why the piece is what it is I was born on the East Coast, spent all my summers going to the shore. You know, that was our whole big thing with the family. It was very kind of connected to the ocean in that way. And now living in Nebraska, I'm so landlocked. I haven't been to the ocean in, I don't know, 15 years, it seems like. So it's like a big hole, it feels like, that it's just something that I'm so used to doing and I've loved so much for so long that I haven't had the opportunity. So the album that I'm looking to record is all based around nautical stuff in some way. So a few of the pieces I'm looking at doing, like Robert Denham's "The Krakens One Day," is as another. Um, some various sea songs and other related things. And so I wanted a piece that centered around that theme, and I mentioned that to Barbara, and right away she said, "Oh, that sounds like an awesome idea. I love music that kind of centers around some thematic material. It makes the compositional process easier for me." Um, and so she asked what kind of a piece I was looking for, and I said, "Well, I'm looking for it to be kind of the centerpiece of the recording project, so probably a longer piece, not a short thing." And she asked, "Do I want multi movement or just one long one?" And I said, "Multi movement would be great. And what I'd really like is for it to be a piece that offers some technical demand, but not too crazy. But I also want it to be very listenable." And I remember saying over dinner that I wanted it to be something I could use for like a children's concert or something. Sorry, my computer's yelling at me that it's going to restart in 15 minutes. So hopefully, if I lose you, that's why. Um, So she was immediately on board with that idea too. And she said, well, what's your concept for the piece? And I said, well, I have a couple of ideas. One, if we kind of centered it around this idea of like nautical myths, mythology, or legends or something. Or if another idea was like, if it was based on specific, like, important locations in maritime lore, if we had like, Rock of Gibraltar and Bering Strait and Bermuda Triangle. And so she kicked around a couple of those ideas for a while, and she settled on the myths and legends one. And she said, well, is there anything else you want? And I said, well, one of my favorite artists for forever, because my dad introduced me, is Stan Rogers, who was a Canadian folk singer and songwriter who specialized in like whaling songs and sea shanties and that sort of thing. And Barbara immediately was like, oh, I love his music. He's been one of my favorites forever. I know exactly what I'm going to do. And then she got to work on it pretty quickly. And this was again in like the summer of 2019 is when we were talking about it. And it was pretty shortly after that, I believe, that she started to have some health problems. So she postponed the writing for a while. And we were talking about when realistically it could be finished. And so she said she was shooting for July 1st of 2020. It wound up being a little bit after that because obviously she was kind of writing when she was able to, and the health issues being what they were. But that was really the impetus for the piece. She started emailing me movements and saying, what do you like? And I didn't offer any changes or any suggestions to it because I thought it was essentially perfect. It was exactly what I wanted because we were on the same page from the beginning. And then, yeah, we went through Brian over at Cimarron, and he set up a consortium. And of course, as you know, Barbara's music is very, very popular with low brass musicians. So I think the consortium, the number of people that Brian wanted to commit, was met in something like 2 days. It was just a ridiculously quick turnaround on getting people to buy in. So that part of it happened really quickly, and Brian spearheaded that whole thing basically just through a Facebook post, and it was done in a couple of days. So
Yeah. Yeah, I've got the list right here, and I know a good number of them. I actually don't remember him posting anything, or I would have tried to get in on it.
And I had done probably 3 or 4 other of Barbara's consortiums. I paid in for several of those, like the suite for horn, tuba, and piano, or euphonium, tuba, and piano. Jumps out in the first of my memory, and there were 2 or 3 others. I think if you went through her catalog and looked at all the consortiums, my name would be on there several times. But
I think you were on Directions. I remember I have all of her music sitting in front of me. I remember seeing her name a couple of times. Yeah. Okay, so that's neat. I'm assuming just what Barbara. She had I think it's called A Butterfly in Time. It was a children's piece that was actually nominated for Canadian Juno right around it was 2006 actually, because that was the same year that she won the Harvey Phillips Award. And she absolutely loved children's music. She taught elementary music in the Kansas City area for a few years. But it's neat that I would have never guessed just from looking at this, and I haven't even heard it, and I don't have a pianist that could play this, so I can't even play through it with anyone just to hear what it sounds like. So it's good to know that that it's somewhat centered around children. And I thought it was funny, like when I first looked at this, I'm like, oh, pirates, that's like a sea shanty. I don't know how much you stay up on TikTok and everything, but there's been a ton of sea shanties, and my pant band has even we did a sea shanty this basketball season.
Oh yeah, our the college. I mean, obviously the college kids here are really into it too, and of course I went full on. Again to kind of meta date myself with multiple references. I said, well, I'm like uber hipster with the sea shanty thing because I was into it back when I was a kid. So you guys are just behind the times.
What did you say the name of the artist was?
Stan Rogers.
Dan Rogers. Okay. All
Yep.
right.
And and it's funny, I've looked through my Facebook messages with Barbara, and yeah, the first movement in particular, the Pirates one, she said what she tried to do was write music that sounds like what Stan would have written if he were writing for instrumentalists and not vocalists. And I think she really hit the nail on the head with it. I mean, I picked it up and played about 30 seconds of it, and I just busted out laughing because it was exactly what I wanted. It's so perfect, really. And having listened to Stan Rogers for so many years, I mean, I could hear the DNA of his music in it very, very easily. So yeah, if you like, if you're gonna listen, his live album From the Breaks, I think it's called, is an excellent starting point for his stuff. Really, really good.
Yeah. I was kind of doing some annotations on this last night, and Barbara wrote some hard music. Most of it, I think, is pretty accessible for advanced undergraduate students and graduate level and above. But I was looking at this opening lick and the closing lick in Sea Monsters.
Yeah.
And I was
Yeah.
maybe she didn't like Josh, but no, I'm kidding.
No, it's what I kind of jokingly refer to as a fireman piece, where it's like 90% relaxation and 10% utter terror. It's like being a firefighter. And yeah, she in her communications with me, she said, well, Brian, looking through the piece during the publication process, was like, man, that last movement is just, and I won't use the exact words that Barbara used to me because it was a little saucy, but she basically said that last movement was a bear. And I said, well, it's good to have something that requires a little bit of woodshed time in the piece. So
yeah, no, obviously, the concerto is probably one of her more hard pieces, and then there's a couple of others. But I saw this, and I'm like, that might be some of the hardest, 8 measures that I've seen from her writing.
yeah, it's. And she said, it doesn't indicate it in the score, obviously, in the published thing, but she said the speed is negotiable, is what she told me over Facebook. So
yeah, and the piano does it in octaves.
Yes.
But, yeah.
The hardest thing in there for me was, maybe when I was 22, I could have played those in one breath, but now that I'm 42, not so much anymore. So, having the piano doubling it helps a little bit because you can hide some breathing in there. But
okay, so I had 4 questions jotted down. The first one was, kind of tell me about how the piece came about. The second one was, what was it like working with Barbara? And the third was, what was the story of the piece? So you've kind of already answered most of those. So Josh, I think if I'm correct in what I'm seeing from Brian and just what I know of Barbara, Barbara was kind of like a grandmother to me. So I was pretty close with her. I'm very close with her daughter as well. I actually think that this was the last tuba piece that she composed. It's it could have been Tennessee Journeys by the one that she did for Chris Combest. But I really think it was Nautical Myths and Legends because you premiered this on Halloween, didn't you?
Yep, that's right.
Yeah. So what, I don't know how to really phrase this question. What does that feel like to possibly be the last one? And I haven't absolutely confirmed it, but Brian has sent me, his full catalog, and this is the last one listed for her for low brass.
Right.
There are a couple of other pieces that he sent me, but it's like there's one for like choir and English horn and cello and piano, and then I think there might be a voice work that he was doing, but
and she was working on another one, I think, for Danny Rowland up at UW Platteville, if memory serves. I think he may have said that at one point in passing.
Yes.
I mean, I wrote this to Barbara when the piece came out, and I said I was absolutely honored to have a piece by her with my name on the front of it. I mean, to me, that probably means more. I don't know. I've been such a fan of her music for so long, and all of my students really. Whenever I have played a piece by Barbara, without fail, and I've done, gosh, I've been at Wayne State for 13 years, and I do a solo recital every semester. So 26 separate solo recitals I've done since
Wow.
I've been here, and every time I've probably done one of Barbara's pieces on, I would say, between a third and a quarter of those programs.
Yeah.
And without fail, my students always say, "Oh, that piece of Barbara's was my favorite." They always love her music because it tells such a great story always, and it's very approachable from the audience perspective. Um, and knowing that her music is so significant to us low brass folks, but how much of an impact it's had on my students and how they all want to rush out and play her music too after they hear it. Um, I wrote to Barbara and said I was again very honored uh, to be able to collaborate with her because she's somebody that I looked up to for so many years as a composer. And the whole act of musical composition is such a foreign thing to me. Like,
Mhm.
I've tried it several times. I try to sit down and write something. I'm like, nope, this is hot garbage. I can't do it. I don't understand how the process works really. Um, to potentially have been the last one is, I don't know, very bittersweet. I mean, I'm happy that I was able to collaborate certainly, but I mean, it was an endless amount of talent, and the possibility of her contributing so many more pieces. I think about what she could have written had she been able to still be with us and continue to write. And no, I mean, she worked until basically she had to put the pen down. It wasn't like, okay, my last few years, I'm going to take it easy and just, hang with the grandkids and go sit on a beach. And I mean, she was diligent all the time and a very hard worker. And she loved her craft. And you could tell in every note that she wrote that she poured everything she could into it for every piece. And it makes me sad that there won't be any more because every piece that I've heard of hers, I've loved it, all of them. Um, yeah, and I'm thrilled that I was able to get this collaboration done with her, and it means a lot to me on a number of levels. But again, I think my main emotion is just it just generally makes me sad that there won't be any more pieces by Barbara.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, I do know she was working on a piece for Gail and Deanna, and Danny Rowland. There might have been one other one, and then I had my original project to finish my dissertation was I was going to record an entire album of her music centered around a new piece for me and my fiance, and he's a baritone singer. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and we had basically written letters to Barbara. We did it about a year and a half or so ago. She was like, I need you to write me what you mean to each other. So basically, we told Barbara our side of the stories, and I've never read his, and I don't think he's ever read mine.
Hmm.
And Brian kind of got my hopes up. He was like, she had sent a piece for, it wound up being the one for like voice and English horn and stuff like that. And he was like, oh, yeah, she just sent me this piece. And I was like, what? And I got really excited. And it wasn't that piece. And I've talked to Megan. I'm like, did she start anything? Did she have any sort of sketches? And she said no. She was like, it she couldn't. We did. It was Gil Robertson and Travis Scott.
Mm-hmm.
So if you've gotten your ITEA journal, we put out a thing in there about her. Um, I think they're coming out.
Okay.
You were kind of talking about you said something to the effect of in mermaids, it was kind of like gliding through water.
Right.
Okay.
Um, and there's also throughout the piece there are thematic ties, movement to movement.
Okay.
So the end of the first movement, Pirates, we have a two-note motive that comes back at the beginning of Ghost Ships. Then in Mermaids, the four measures, it starts just really gracefully in the key of G flat major. And it kind of gets into a lot of chromaticism about 2/3 of the way through the movement. And we get this little uh, quartuplet against the 12/8. And that motive comes back about 2/3 of the way through Ghost Ships. Um, and then some of what happens in Ghost Ships kind of ties into the end of Sea Monsters too a little bit. And so there's kind of a cohesive story that runs a little bit through the whole piece that, I kind of wish I'd had more of an opportunity to ask Barbara what she had in mind with those little thematic ties. But I think it allows you to kind of come up with a storyline that runs cohesively through the whole piece, which I think is kind of cool too.
Yeah. Okay. I'm glad that you pointed out because I did not notice those little motos in there. So that's good to know. Yeah. Okay. So when you were kind of talking, whenever Gail, Travis, and I did those interviews, I think I was talking about that right before this thing crapped out the first time. Whenever we did those, we did them in July, and I think the last one was August 8th or 9th. So it was 3 months right before she passed. And she had started a new drug called OFEV. It was FDA approved, but it was still somewhat experimental.
Mhm.
And she did really well at first, and then it just went. But something that we kind of asked her, and we had no idea that we had that little amount of time,
Mhm.
because I was like, I'm gonna get this piece, and she was like, it might take me a while, but I'm like, that's fine. When you get it, you get it, and then we all know what happened. But what do you think? So we asked Barbara, what do you think your musical legacy is, or what would you like your musical legacy to be? And she said, uh, it's a hard question to answer because I don't get to decide my legacy. But her hope was essentially that she still played, and I mean, she is. You know,
Mhm.
I see people all the time. Um, Even though we're not necessarily getting a lot of public performances, there's still tons of people doing mashup videos or live stream recitals where they'll program something, and I think her music is unbelievably appropriate right now because it has such healing powers. But it just relates to the human experience. And my teacher Tom Stein at UMKC called her the humanistic composer or something like that. Brian used to refer to her as the death composer. There was like a period from like 2008 to 2011 that all of her pieces were about death, but by no fault of her own. So, Josh, what do you think Barbara's legacy is?
That's a hard question to answer. Because I think, yeah, the description of her being a composer who writes music that's very, yeah, I mean, maybe humanistic is a very apt word. But I think, for a lot of composers, and I think especially writing for the tuba, I make no mistake about the fact that sitting down for the average layperson, sitting down and listening to a tuba recital is maybe not the most appealing thing. And I think there's a reason that so many of the solo instruments that have become more popular lie in higher tessituras. I think for the average person going and listening to really low instruments playing solo recitals, it just doesn't connect in a way. And I think we're already the tube is a little bit at a disadvantage as a solo vehicle just because of the nature of the instrument. But I think that Barbara, more than almost any other composer that I know, was able to realize what really the potential of the tuba as a true solo voice and the ability to connect to audiences. She was able to make that. She could write for the tuba and make it sound like a piece for voice or a piece for violin, in a way that people will sit down and listen, and they'll genuinely, even if they don't know that they like listening to the tuba, they'll like listening to her music being played by the instrument. And I think in a lot of ways, her music is a great vehicle for ambassadorship for the tuba as a musical instrument. Um, and from the very beginning, that's what I think her music represented. Um, how she got into writing for the tuba was playing for my teacher, as I said before, um, and because he had gone to Pitt State as an undergrad, and he went back there for a guest recital and played a recital, and Barbara accompanied him. And he did a lot of transcriptions of 19th century romantic lyrical works. He was really into the Strauss stuff and the Elgar stuff and Saint-Saëns and all that kind of thing. And so she commented that she had never heard the tuba played in this kind of romantic lyrical style before, and that opened her up. And so from the beginning, that was her concept of what the tuba could and should be, is it could be a vehicle for delivering really beautiful melodic material. And right from the get-go, that's how she wrote for it. And I think from our perspective as tuba players, I think really that gave us again an avenue for the average person to connect to the instrument in a way that maybe other composers who write, I don't know, more academic music, so to speak, don't really allow for that kind of an audience connection in that way.